All right, good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible now. Uh, I just need a heads up before I go ahead if I'm audible. So, if you're watching me on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook, just give me a heads up. Am I audible now? Great. So, let me just check. Awesome. All right, so today is the big day that I've been waiting for a very long time. Today is the first day of my podcast. My podcast is officially being launched today. My podcast is called as the 32-minute podcast. So that's enough of my already. For people who don't know me, I am Mayur Davda. I'm a dentist by profession, and I am a tech geek. I love to do everything tech, or I love. I'm gadget savvy. So I've been into practice since the past 11 years now, I think. But the thought of podcasting came up maybe since the past 1 year. Since then, I've been struggling to get some details about how to start a podcast, and then my podcasting journey actually started on the September of 11th. That's just a couple of days back. It's been a roller coaster ride, guys. I thoroughly enjoyed each and every moment of everything about the podcasting aspect of the 32-minute podcast. So the 32-minute podcast, or the 32-minute, is a podcast for dentists, not in fact not only for dentists but all the dental professionals. It could be a dental hygienist or a dental ceramist and stuff like that. It's also great if you're a dental student, if you're an intern. So this podcast is going to be helpful for everyone. And in this podcast, I plan to and have already interviewed some of the best dentists of the globe and dental professionals of the globe. And also, I'll be interviewing a lot of other people. For example, if there are influencers who are not dentists but who are helpful, they could be helpful to us in any way. For example, in life, in self help and stuff like that, or even in other aspects like marketing. I am going to be inviting them over onto the podcast. So here we go. This is the first day that I've been waiting for since such a long time. This is the official launch. This is the first day of the 32-minute podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mayur Davda, and I'm so delighted that I have the company of all of you all who've come to watch the event today. So what do we have in store for us today? Today, I'm going to be interviewing one of the best known designers of India. He is Rohit Keluskar. He passed out from the National Institute of Designing. He is great at branding, marketing, and he has an OCD for being perfect. He's really good at it. And today, we're going to be having a talk on stuff like why branding is important, what kind of logo one should have, what are the different colors that are important in the logo, is font important, is the placement of sentences important, how long should be a sentence, and most importantly, when is the right time to call over a designer or an artist when you need them. Should we invite them at the last moment? That actually frequently happens. So today on our show we have Rohit Keluskar. So here he is. Hi Rohit, nice to see you.
Hi, Mayur.
Right. So can anybody give me a thumbs up if you can hear Rohit nice and clear? So once we have a thumbs up, I think we'll go ahead with that. Let's
Yep, am
wait
I
for
audible?
a confirmation. Yeah, I think you should be audible. I can hear you pretty well, but
Excellent.
we'll wait for the audience to just reply, because there's usually a lag of around 5 to 10 seconds for the message to go
Yeah.
across to the audience. So, Dr. Suresh, who is also going to be attending, Dr. Suresh, who's also going to be speaking at 5 o'clock today evening, he is giving a thumbs up. So I think everything is nice and loud and
Great.
clear. So welcome to the show, Rohit. It's a big time.
Thank you, and congratulations on the launch. Big
Thank you so much.
congratulations.
This is the first day. I'm really
And
excited
thanks
about
for the
the.
very ambitious introduction as well.
You've always been my inspiration. You've always been the designer that I always seek out for help. So let me jump right into the
Thank you.
topic, Rohit.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
are you ready to take questions now?
Yeah, sure. Happy to.
All right. So the first question is, why is branding all that important for all of us? Why do you think it's so vital for anybody? In fact, not only dentists, but anybody who's looking out for a brand identity. Why is branding such a huge stuff? Why there's so much buzz about it?
Okay, I think it's excellent that you have used the word branding and an identity, because a lot of times people come to you saying that they need a logo. So a logo, if you ask me, you need a logo, I would say no, you don't need a logo. What you need is much bigger than that, which is your identity. Uh, like consider you only. You are Dr. Mayur Davda, but I mean you're a dentist, but that's not how you would like to be known, right? If you have a clinic, suppose say in Chembur, you have a clinic in Chembur, so you don't want to be known as just like a dentist who is in Chembur. But there's more to it. Like people experience when they come, they meet you, they get treatment. So all these things form part of your identity. And same way, this is like maybe not a visual communication, but when you talk of the visual aspect of a brand, so that's when the visual communication comes into play. And that's when I think how you communicate visually forms your identity. Mm, and I think more than identity, how people, what people actually do is they differentiate you. They don't identify you. More than that, they differentiate you. Yeah, that you are Dr. Mayur Davda. Maybe you're not like Dr. Rahul, or you're not like Dr. Sami, or you're not like some other doctor, or maybe like you are Mayur, so you're not like a Babagao, or you're not like somebody else. So basically, it's more about creating your identity. That's what is whole branding, and this communication aspect is part of is like your thing. And logo is just like a starting point of the whole communication that goes into your brand. So I hope I have answered like the basics. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible for the audience.
Right. So you've got to speak considering that all the people who are listening to us, maybe 90% of them are dentists or doctors from
Yeah, sure,
different
sure.
different
That's
fields.
true. True.
Right. So, for people who do not know, the logo of the 32-minute podcast, that's the logo of the 32-minute, has been conceptualized by Rohit since the beginning. And there's one interesting part over here. I've been in touch with Rohit since a very long time. So, before I give out my experiences, I want Rohit to answer this question. Rohit, what do you think is the right time for people to approach a professional? Or, in fact, a lot of people are doing it on their own. So, my next question is, can they do it on their own, or is it important that a professional has to be involved in this? And if a professional has to be involved in this, what is the right time for them to get involved in the entire designing process or the entire branding process? What do you have to say about this?
Um, there's a saying, right? Prevention is better than cure. So by that, I would say a designer should always be involved right from the onset of the project. So a lot of my experiences with people have been like they need an identity, but they don't have the budget. Budget, of course, plays a very important role. So they come to you just for the logo. And okay, you design a logo, but what do you do after that? How to apply the logo? We can consider the example of 32 minute, like you had shared. We explored a lot of backgrounds. We explored a lot of backgrounds for this event
Yeah,
also.
yeah,
So if you,
yeah.
is there a way to share one of the older? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
So
this
this
was one
guy, this
of
is going to
the.
be a little embarrassing for me now when Rohit is going to start pointing my mistakes.
No, it's always a learning process. The moment I see this, I see that that podcast word is stuck to the logo. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
there's a technical term I'll use, that is exclusion zone. So a logo, I think after this I'll go to our logo also. Uh, like the podcast is coming close to the logo, and that podcast launch event is almost has almost suppressed or like pushed the logo to the corner. So
Yeah.
these are the problems which I see after anybody has a logo, they don't know how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
That
Can
you
you
will not
allow
be
me?
guilty as charged.
No, it's always a learning experience, but that's why I feel a designer plays a crucial role in not just
Yeah.
creating of an identity, but
Yeah.
also an
Yeah.
application point of view. I'll
Yes.
just share. Allow me to share the screen.
Yeah.
I'll just
Yeah.
share.
Sure.
Let me know when you can see it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can just start
Uh,
sharing your screen.
yeah, can you see my screen now?
Absolutely. And you are on the screen.
Great, great. So, can you see our 32-minute logo? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
All
this is
right.
like a very quickly put together an example to show the exclusion zone. You can see the red
Yeah.
markers all around, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so ideally nothing should come in between this space around. So if this is your logo, the central unit, and this is how you use it, this red space is something which should always be kept empty. Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah,
are
yeah.
audible.
So this red space is something that should never be filled with anything. So yeah, let's
Mm-hmm.
get. I'll stop sharing and maybe we can get back to yeah. So now you come to the next background that we have now, and you'll see.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
instantly you'll see the difference. Like it's the logo has its own space. The symbol here we have used
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
symbol and not the complete logo, so it has its own space. Yeah. So
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
small details, but that's why I would say a designer should, I mean, leave the job to the experts. That's today's mantra, I guess. You
All right,
can't,
that answers a lot of questions. And so
yeah.
what I want to tell the audience is, very honestly, I am a tech geek, and I've also been a photographer since a very long time. So composition is a very important aspect of my life as well.
Mhm.
And despite so many years of backup of experience, if I can make such a big mistake that Rohit just pointed out, for example, this is the background for us right now. But what I was planning was a background like this, which sticks to my colors. But you can see what mistake I made, like what Rohit had said. The podcast word on the top left hand corner that said 11 o'clock position is very close to my logo, and I forgot the technical term about it, but it's called the exclusion zone, if I'm not mistaken, Rohit.
Yes, yes. So that's
Yeah,
just like
so I
a
have to
minor
respect
aspect.
that.
Yeah. So
Ah,
leave the
yeah.
job to the experts.
So when Rohit is saying leave the jobs to the experts, I'm definitely sure this is not a minor aspect by any means. Right. So that answers the first part of the question. But what about the second part of the question? When do you think that a designer must be involved? What do you mean since the brand conception? What is the exact time when people should involve a designer into professional
Uh,
things like building a logo, and in fact even stuff like designing the name, or
mhm.
thinking about a name? What is the right time?
Yes, so I feel as a designer, we are kind of used to thinking from the other perspective, from the receiver's perspective.
Yeah.
Let us consider like maybe it's all visual communication, right? When you it's not all visual communication, but mostly it's visual communication when we talk of the logo, the visual identity, and all these aspects. And to explain visual communication, maybe we can consider our communication, like you and me talking.
Mm-hmm.
So you are a dentist, I am a designer. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you start throwing dental terminologies, I am not going to
You
understand.
won't get
And
it. It's so
if
true.
I so that gap will be there. And what designers consistently do is they bridge the gap between the client and the audience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to instantly get into the zone might be it might be a learning process which we have
Yeah.
already mastered. So that's why a design professional ideally could be right from the start, right from the naming, so that I mean, you might think some name is good, but
Yeah.
maybe we consider the audience
Wow.
and we might feel it might not work, or the sound aspect of it is also into picture. Then how it will look as visual, that also comes into picture. How to
That's
so
true.
lot of nitty gritties are there which are there. So ideally it should be like a baby of a combined people. A
Yeah. Yeah.
lot of
That's
people
so true.
involved. So. a
Yes,
designer.
I believe that
And
there's a lot of effort going on in that. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a sense of belongingness also. Designers,
Yeah.
it's like an artist basically. So there's a sense of belonging also, which is associated. And if you ask me till what time the designer should be involved, like that's the other end, like from the start to
Yeah.
end. So
Yeah.
I would say it shouldn't be like a handover. Like I give you the logo, I give you all
Mm-hmm.
the file. That's it. You give me the money. That's it. You don't trouble me anytime again. I don't know you. You don't know me. It shouldn't be that sort of a thing. It should be more of a handshake sort of a thing. Like
Yeah.
you build a relationship, and it's like an ongoing learning process where the way we have been doing for
Mm-hmm.
this project also right from the beginning. It's been.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have learned a lot of things about alignment, precision of design.
The hard way,
So
yes.
yeah. So that's the. Yeah, I hope I have answered the question.
Yeah, you have absolutely. So I asked you two questions. You've been bang on target. In fact, I would probably want to share my experience with the audience over here. So I involved Rohit in this project. That's the 32-minute. Right from the inception, since in the sense, as soon as I decided that I want to be coming up with a podcast, Rohit was on my team, and at that time when he was involved, we are not even sure what the podcast is going to be called. That's the right time because
Yeah, that's right.
how Rohit exactly said is that we are dentists or we are into our own thought process, but the audience is in a completely different wavelength, and it's important for us to communicate to the audience nicely, and that's when a designer is so helpful. So when we think about the name also, it's very important to involve a designer or a brand professional or a branding professional like Rohit into the process, because he's going to point out if the name is appropriate or if it's like a cliche. For example, I wanted to keep the word dental or dentistry in my podcast name, but don't we already have so many YouTube channels or even the podcasting platforms which have the word dental, dentist, or dentistry in it? So Rohit was the one who said that don't go with the usual terms. Any which ways, what happens in podcast search is that the description also helps in the search process. So even if the name does not have the word dental, dentist, or dentistry in it, it's completely fine, and that holds true even when it comes to your website. So we are already full of cliche words, whatever the profession we are in. So thinking out of the box really helps, and that's when a designer or a branding professional like Rohit actually helps a lot, because that name is going to be sticking with you for your life or through your life. And then we go to the next step, that is what all elements do we want in our logo and stuff like that. So that's actually my next question, Rohit. Uh, how do you go about deciding what should be the elements of the logo or the brand, and what should be the color choices? What could be the, how do you go about deciding the typography? How do you basically define the personality of any particular brand? What are the aspects that you take into consideration when a client is approaching you and you give them ideas? Like, I'm sure the client have their own thought process as well, but how do you go about the entire process of initiating a brand with respect to the designing aspect?
Interesting question. Uh, yeah.
Maybe you can
So
explain that with the with our logo as well. That's going to be very helpful, because that's one of the things that created a lot of buzz. Everybody has loved the logo, so maybe you can explain this question with the help of our logo as well. That's going to be a great learning process for
yeah,
everyone.
definitely. So first thing, I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, I'll just accept it. Yeah, screen is completely visible. Awesome.
Yes. So the first thing that comes into consideration is definitely, for me, the starting point is the audience. Audience plays a huge role in deciding like how to go about it. Like you named it 32-minute, right? Okay. But then what all visuals that we use? So we start making visuals first. when around this, like
Mm-hmm.
it's a dental podcast, so dental
Right.
32-minute, all these visuals we start, and we build a visual. Like I usually do that way. I build a visual repository of all the visuals that come to my mind when the brief is given, like picked
Right.
up from the
Right.
brief. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then for shortlisting, we try to get into the audience mode.
Right.
So will the audience understand this? Like suppose here we have used a toothbrush, okay,
Right.
but it's
Right.
not like a toothbrush. If I just make a toothbrush for a dental podcast,
Yeah.
it's obvious, right? People would get
Yeah.
bored. Like, yeah, there's nothing new in it. Kuch alag hai nahi isme. Why should I go for this? Like there is nothing appreciating. That's
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
this we have combined the brush with a sound wave. Yeah, that's the
Mm-hmm.
unfamiliar part of it. Maybe people are familiar with a sound wave, people are familiar with a brush, but when they two come together, that's when it's something unfamiliar to them. That's when the recall value is also higher. Oh, ye to dekha nahi. This is an interesting combination. That sort of reaction usually comes in. Yeah. Do you agree with this? I think we have been through
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
also. Yeah. And
Couldn't
then
agree. Yeah. I couldn't agree
yeah,
more.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that sort of thing comes into picture when the audience has to be controlled. And what is the second part of the question? I missed out a bit.
Right. So, how do you decide on the elements, or how do you choose colors and typeface?
Yeah, right. So when you consider this form, when you have shortlisted the form, then you think about it. How strong is the form? Like if the form is this is the form. Actually, logo has three aspects.
Mm-hmm.
This could be the form, and this is the symbol.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is the symbol, and this is the type, and together they complete a logo. So
Right.
how
Right.
I usually go about it is. When the symbol is too strong, it itself is creating your identity. Okay,
Hmm.
so then the typeface can be relatively simpler, just complementing. Yeah, like you have seen films like usually the lead actor, if he's strong enough, the supporting actor is just like a supporting role. He doesn't try to come to the limelight. That's how that's
Right.
how these
Right.
two that's how these two work. And
Right.
that's about choosing a typeface. And if the form is simpler, then I would maybe go for a little bit more dramatic typeface, so together they can create an
Okay.
identity which is strong enough. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, now second question about how you go about choosing a color.
Yeah.
Okay, one more thing I would like to mention when you choose a typeface. So this
Yeah.
is your form, and the form has two. Any logo has actually two aspects. One is a functional aspect, and one is an emotional aspect also, right? Uh, so when you talk of this logo, the functional aspect would be that the 32-minute or it's a dental podcast that should be visible. That's the functional aspect. Yeah, and for an audience which is not so visually literate, like our dental audience, or in general, when you're talking about a mass audience, uh, the logo has to be very simple and direct. So functional aspect has to be bang on. It should speak about a dental podcast. But secondly, it should also have an emotional aspect, like the thickness of these strokes and the fact that I have not done a lot of fill. Like these are strokes, and the thickness of the stroke. It's not too thick. It's not too soft. It's not too weak, or it's not. So these are the emotional aspects. It's not too loud. It's not too timid. It's a bit strong. It's a bit tough. Also, so these emotional aspects also come into picture along with the functional aspects. So all these things go into choosing your typeface, your form, designing your
Right.
form. And when you come to color, actually, I'll give you. It's a vast topic to discuss about color and
Right.
typeface. But have you ever taken drawing seriously, Mayur, in school?
Honestly speaking, you would probably want to exclude me out of this. I used to suck at it, like quite literally. I can't even draw a straight line. I'm not really sure
Okay.
how I got into dentistry because drawing was an important aspect. But yeah, you always be at
Yeah,
the forefront. So
yeah. So basically, they. basic things that they teach you, and I think it's cool also, is there is like a light region and there's a shadow. Okay, so there's a
Yeah.
highlight and there's a dark tone, but there are also midtones in the picture, right? So
Right.
when I give a color palette, and it's like in a tight deadline, so you have to less time to explore, or there's less budget and all that. Then you stick to the basics, which is you give a light tone, you give a mid tone, and you give a dark tone.
Right.
So if you consider a 32-minute example that you can see in the background, uh, you can see the yellow, you can see
Yeah.
mm, the gray. So these two,
Mm-hmm.
the dark tone and mid tone, are already there.
Right.
Yeah, and with combination of these, you could use a white, which could be the highlight as per the application requirement.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
these three could be sufficient.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a range. You won't
Yeah.
anytime fall short of in any application. You won't find yourself at loss of something. Like you don't have a tool. You are missing a tool. You won't experience that anytime on.
Right.
And then you
Right.
can build on this palette by creating primary. Okay, sorry. I'll share screen again.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
So you can build on this primary palette using the shades, midtones, I mean other shades of the colors,
Right.
yeah, as a secondary palette.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then you can also build up on, like, this is a primary typeface that we have used. Now, when choosing a secondary typeface, now this is your hero, and it's trying to establish your
Yeah.
style and your identity. So the secondary
Yeah.
typeface, it's not necessary to be stylish like these two. You can keep it simple and functional, and use it for communication. Like if you see 32 minute is much more condensed, and this last one is slightly wider typeface,
Yeah.
and you don't notice that it's wide or it's narrow or something until you
Mm-hmm.
compare with this.
Right.
So you can go with such a basic theory when you
Right.
go for choosing your typeface and your actually, this is something you should ideally you should hire a designer, of course,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
this is
Sure.
something you should know the basics so that you are aware of what's happening with you.
Right.
When you're paying something, you need to know what you're getting back. So these basic things will definitely help you to take a wise decision.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot of tools online as well. For example, there are color palettes which are available online, in which there are
Yes,
websites which give out good color combinations. So for people who do not know what
true.
is a color palette, just Google it, and you'll be directed to a lot of websites that are going to give you different color palettes. They could be a single color and different saturations, or it could be complementary colors, or it could be three different colors. There are a lot of different color palettes available.
Yes,
I want to share a story over here, as to why we decided upon the colors that we have with us today. So the primary reason why I wanted to go with a bold color, uh, which is yellow, as my background. Obviously, yellow is my favorite color. That's one reason, and the second reason is that. So basically, this is a podcast, and you are going to be putting your podcast into podcast directories like the Apple Podcast or the Google Podcast or Spotify. And the podcast actually comes over there as a very tiny thumbnail. So, my primary requirement, which is what I had clearly conveyed to Rohit, was that I want my podcast visual to be really, like, it should be bouncing out, and it should grab the attention. It should catch the viewer's attention immediately. So for example, if you are scrolling through a podcast and you just type the word 32 minute or something like dental, you will be able to see at least 15 different podcast channels which are there on the screen. Now, my first communication with my audience, although this is a podcast and everything is audio related, the first communication with my audience is actually a visual communication. My logo, my symbol is going to be deciding if my viewer is going to be clicking on my podcasting channel or not. That is why
true,
I
true.
had
Yeah.
suggested that the color should be vibrant, and my podcasting thumbnail my visual should stand out in the entire list of whatever search outcomes are there for the viewer. So that was really helpful, Rohit, and I'm very happy that we selected on blue, and obviously the darker shade as well. Like you said, you have the main color and then you have the mid tones. It was a very, very good choice.
Yeah,
So can
true.
you?
As you pointed out, these, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but even when you are designing your clinic, so the clinic interiors, the colors you use in your clinic, maybe your patient file, and those uniform colors, those things also matter in brand communication, as we discussed in the very first question.
Right.
So all these applications also have to be considered. They form like a mandatory checklist for choosing a
Yeah.
color, along with the emotional aspects that come into play. Yeah.
Right, right, right. So I would request you to share your screen once again, and can you explain the different elements that are a part of our logo, if you don't mind? So we've already spoken about the toothbrush and the sound waves. Could you
Yeah.
actually explain the other part of the logo, which a lot of people try to guess? So a lot of people have come up with their own imagination, like that is a toothbrush, that is a sound wave, so they could guess that, but they could not guess the arch on the right hand side. So can you just share the
Okay.
screen and explain
Yeah.
it to audience? But the responses that we've got is it's a smile, or it's like a D. D stands for dental, or for Davda, that's my last name. So I would request you to share your screen once, and maybe
Sure.
you can explain it to the audience as to what the entire logo, what's the meaning of the different elements in our logo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we are now familiar with the unfamiliar part, which is the brush with a sound wave, like that
yeah,
combination.
yeah,
And what
yeah,
this is, the curve is what the question is. So basically, just because it's going to be a mass audience, or I mean, we don't have a control over it, and a lot to do with the range of when you talk of visual literacy and all, there'll be a range of audience that's going to view the logo. So in order that everybody knows it's going to be 32-minute, so that's when we also had, I think, thought of keeping it like a 32-minute podcast. Like the
yeah,
duration of your podcast would be 32 minutes, around 30
yeah,
minutes, ideally. So this is like a timer that shows an half an hour or 32 minute to uh, communicate along with the logo. Yeah, 32-minute. So
right.
that's the meaning of it actually. But it's like a bonus. I think if it's
So
people are
nice.
identifying with DS for Dawda, I think it's a bonus for you. People are recalling.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
for a designer, it's always a challenge to more
Right.
than trying to communicate something, to make sure that it doesn't miscommunicate anything.
Yeah,
That's always a challenge. If you remember, when we designed the sound wave also,
yeah,
we did a range of explorations to make sure it doesn't look only like a sine wave, or it doesn't look only like a brush, and
yeah,
that it tries to balance both. Same way, so that's the challenge a designer is constantly in, like how to avoid the misinterpretations from a logo. And
right,
it always testing and time tells about the success of logo, how precise it is. Yeah.
right. That was interesting. In fact, that timer that you put was really innovative, and I'm so happy that everything about the name is a part of the logo process, which is really rare, and it happens in very and some of the best logos. In fact, this could not be a better logo. This is the best logo that I could have ever thought of.
And also, if you see the stroke thickness, and I was talking about the emotional aspects. So
Yeah,
that is very critical actually. Which I mean, as a dentist, I mean, as a non-designer, you may have it in your subconscious, like you always know it, but you
yeah,
don't know it maybe formally or consciously. So that also comes into play. The thickness of the stroke, like
yeah,
it shouldn't really take away from the brush, or it shouldn't really be so overpowering than the type also, and it shouldn't be too weak that people don't notice it. Yeah. So each element, like a good actor, you don't notice the acting, but you
yeah.
you focus on the whole
So true.
story part of it, the experience part of it. So those part that also
Hmm.
comes into picture.
Yeah. So that's something so important. In fact, it is one more thing I wanted to share over here is it is really important for the clients like me not to be bossy over the designers, and we have to give them the freedom of imagination. I'm sure you agree with that because a lot of people come up with, I want this only, I want that only. Uh, so you need to understand that the designer is the building gap or the bridging gap between the audience and you, and he is the one who has a better understanding of the audience, and let him take the decisions for you, if I'm not wrong, Rohit.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, can I stop sharing?
Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah,
So yeah, there are two aspects of it. Of course, the owner or the client is knows his business. Yeah. So we as I mean, it works both ways. A designer can't hijack from the client, as well as the client can't hijack from the designer. So there should be a balance. The client knows the business well, and the designer knows the audience well. And
yeah,
actually explained you this simple communication between you and me, right? And the designer in between the audience and the client. So the role of the designer is to faithfully translate a designer's client's message to the audience. Yeah,
right,
and that's
right.
his job. So I understand clients can be bossy and all that, but there needs to be like a smooth handshake. So in the
Yeah,
process,
yeah,
a designer should also get educated, or not more than educated. He should learn. He should grow, and the
right,
client also in the process should grow
right.
with what
Yeah,
terminology. Oh, I would like to say that when a patient comes to you and you give a treatment, you
yeah,
explain him in simple terms, right? Like what he's going to be
yeah,
going
yeah.
through. So same way, I feel a designer's responsibility also there to explain in understandable
Yeah,
terms to the client.
so true.
So
Yeah,
yeah, when that happens, I think after that it's never a bossy situation. Like
yeah, yeah,
once the client understands why the choices are being made, I don't think he will be trying to hijack. I mean, I have. It's always been this case with
that's great. I'm sure.
it's trying to
Yeah.
balance.
So a couple of points that you made in between, but I would probably want to elaborate or emphasize on it. Rohit mentioned
Sure.
about how visually literate the audience is. So that's really important. So this could also mean geographic distribution as well. For example, if you're planning a clinic or a setup in a city, their mentality could be different. Their understanding of
Yeah.
symbols, thought process is different. However, you cannot make that same logo if you are in a two-tier city or a three-tier city, which is not that urban. So everything has to be taken into consideration. If I'm not wrong, Rohit, is that
Yes,
what you
yes.
meant? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. A
Right.
simpler example I would give is to re-emphasize this issue. Like you've seen shops which sell shoes or chappals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where there is a, I mean, where there is a very local shop, usually with the name you find a chappal or a shoe
Yeah.
symbol there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it tries to be that direct. Yeah. And
Right.
when you are looking for a premium brand of a shoe,
Mm-hmm.
so they not necessarily have a chappal or a shoe, or the form is very much refined. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
difference, if like a local shop keeps a very refined logo, maybe
Right.
people, his audience would feel it's a very यार ये तो थोड़ा हाई-फाई शॉप है इसमें expensive होगा तो
Yeah.
that's how they might skip it. So audience and
Yeah.
like these things play a critical role
Yeah,
this
I'm
side.
sure. In fact, everything it's like a personality altogether. Like the colors that are reflected on your logo, is it important that they should reflect in your interiors as well? Because that's the behavior, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, that's consistency. Like you also, when you're taking the podcast, or maybe when you're talking to patients, you're one person. When the patient goes, maybe you start talking, "Hey, kya patient hoga?" You don't do that. So that's like you are consistent with the personality you put up to people.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
brand consistency is very important for people to trust you. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's shown on our podcasting channel as well. So for people people who do not know, our podcasting channel is available on Google. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Ghana, and all the major platforms. So one thing that's going to be consistent on all our platforms is the background, the logo, and if you see, the colors are resonating over here as well. For example, the names that you see on your screen. So we have, for example, Dr. Suresh just commented right now. So even in the comment on the left hand side, you can see that yellow color is consistent with our branding. So this is a part of the brand identity. So would you say that this consistency is really important for building a personality for our brand, Rohit?
Yeah, definitely. Not just using the color, but how you use it is also important. There's something known as tone of voice, right? So when it's also like a visual tone. So
Right,
again, allow me to critique one of your applications. So I mean,
right,
not it's still I mean, mistake anybody any start initial mistake. Even I have gone through that process. So the invite
right.
or the schedule that you have shared, it has a yellow background.
Yeah,
So I mean, at times what happens is it gives too much saturation or too much contrast.
right.
Sometimes you don't need to be loud. Sometimes you don't need to be. You can talk it politely or softly. So that tone is also important. Just not like अभी color है ये दो color है तो हर जगह पे यही colors चिपका दो.
Right,
That you can't go with that mentality. So sometimes you need to use a secondary palette to balance out
right.
the thing. Yeah, and if you keep on using, like if you keep on wearing the same shirt every day just to re-emphasize your brand, then
Yeah,
people might after a point people might not
yeah,
notice you only. Yeah,
yeah,
so that's
yeah.
that's like a that's you need
Right.
to
So
keep
it's
that
important
also
to
in
be
mind.
balanced.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah. Carefully,
right.
the application
So,
part is really crucial.
absolutely. So we're in the last 5 minutes of our episode right now. So I'm going to be requesting the audience, if you have any questions for Rohit, please put them across so that I can show it to our audience on the screen. So we'll move on with the first question, which Dr. Suresh is asking us. Which
Yeah.
is the best website to find color combination easily?
Lot of adjectives actually. There's the best website easily. There are actually a lot of websites. There's Adobe Coolers where you can find color palette, but maybe you need to know a bit more about colors on that. Then there is Coolers, Coolors.
Right,
Uh, and there are a lot of websites. Actually, you can just Google color combinations also if you want it that easily. But I think these websites have some information they share also about complementary colors, analogous colors, and other color palettes.
yeah,
So you can always get into uh, that.
yeah,
And but the way you shared, Mayur, is to select any color, and
yeah,
then the way you put it, the way we tested it out on a screenshot of an app to see
yeah,
how it looks in comparison with
yeah.
other
That's
colors.
so true.
So that is very much essential. That testing part.
Right,
In the very first question I mentioned, you are not really in the process of creating an identity. Actually, you are trying to be different than others,
right,
right?
right, right.
So it's always important to test out your colors.
Right. So this kind of answers Dr. Suresh's question. I have also shared my screen of a website called as Color Hunt, Dr. Suresh. So you can check out this website, and there are multiple websites like these actually, and you can just
Yeah, there are a lot
Google
of websites.
color palette.
So
But this is one of the best
mm,
websites, Dr. Suresh. So if that's what you're looking for, and it's going to be very helpful. So it gives you all different kind of color combinations, like the way you Rohit has said. It'll give you two color options, three color options, four color options, complementary color options, and various different types.
yeah, one more thing I would like to emphasize here is what industry like this, like a lot of dentists are seeing our podcast. So I assume it's like medical professionals who are
Yeah.
part of the audience. So
Right.
understanding the industry trend and
Yeah.
what colors are majorly used,
Mm-hmm.
that is also something you should keep in mind. You can't be
That's
too
so true.
away from the trend or the norm because your audience are going to go by that. and
Yeah,
you can't be
yeah.
too similar to others. So you have to kind of strike that balance. Maybe you can use one color which is very much in part of the palette, and second color could be a different from a different zone to create a difference.
Right, right. So that's all we have time for, I think. So it's an honor to have you, Rohit. It was really a
Thank
very
you so much.
informative session.
I
Yeah,
hope that was, yeah. I
it
hope
was a great
people
session.
find
I'm
it
sure
useful.
there were a lot of points to take away, especially points like when to involve a designer. It should be during the beginning, and the process is like a continuous process. There were more important points that you gave. For example, what should be a color like, what should be the typeface like. It should not be overwhelming on the logo. It should be
Sure,
balanced, and you should have good amount of space on all sides of the logo. Where we also saw the mistake that I made, and you also explained our logo very well, which has the toothbrush, which has the sound wave, and also the timer. So, and you also spoke about the visual understanding of the audience as a visual language. So our audience is so important before we decide on a particular logo or a branding, and also important aspects like the colors that we decide on, have to reflect on the interiors as well and other different aspects as well, but it has to be a balanced process. It should not be like an overwhelming of all the logo colors on different rooms of our interiors as well. So it's so
true,
many
true.
points to take away.
I hope people go to their, like, all the audience goes to their designers with the brief that they need an identity and not just that they need a logo.
Right,
Yeah,
right. So,
yeah.
uh, it was great to have you, Rohit, on the show, and I hope you enjoyed as well. Like I
Yeah,
enjoyed
sure.
thoroughly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
Congratulations once again for the
yeah.
launch of your
Thank you
event.
so much, and I'm so happy. I couldn't have been
Was
happier that you were the
glad to
first
be part
speaker
of it.
on my
Yeah, yeah,
show,
I'm also glad to
like
be
on the
part of
live
it.
event. I'm
Thank you.
honored. I'm
Honor.
absolutely overwhelmed. Thank you so much. So for everyone, that is Rohit. If you want to connect with him, you can do that. So what I can do is I can share his contact details to you. If you can email it to me on podcast at 32minute.com. Before I log off, I just had one more question, Rohit. What is one of the most frequently done errors or mistakes that you've seen in the branding or the logo process, something that really puts you off? Would you like to share that if you don't mind?
Uh, Yeah, so when you consider the budget, we consider a lot of mistakes, right, during our process discussion. A lot of things to do, things not to do, that sort of thing. So all these are actually put together in a brand manual, which is like a document on how to use a logo. Because today you might find one designer, maybe 2 years later you might find some other designer to extend your brand. So that's
Right.
when the brand manual is really important on how to keep your brand consistent. And when you budget for an identity or a logo, make sure you tell the designer you need the brand identity and like have a budget for it also. It will tell you about all these exclusion zones, how not to use a logo, and how to use a logo across various applications. So that's really important. If you can Google the brand manuals of big brands, you will see. And maybe a smaller company can have a smaller version of it. But I think that's a mistake which a lot of people do.
Right. That's really important. I'm so sure about that. So we had a very interactive session. It was awesome. For people who would want to connect with Rohit, what you can do is you can email us on podcast at 32minute.com, the email address that you can see on the screen down here, and we'll be happy to connect you with Rohit, because he's really awesome with whatever he does. And for people who do not know where our show is there everywhere. It's there on Apple Podcast, it's there on Google Podcast, it's there on Spotify, it's there on Ghana, and we are going to be uploading our first ever episode today, which is going to be so awesome. So once again, thank you so much, Rohit, for coming on the show. It was a
Thank you
very
very
informative
much.
session. Thank you. Amazing,
Thank you.
amazing. So that's all we have time for today. Thanks once again, and thank you to all the audience who were with us throughout. I'm sure it was a very informative session for all of us, and all of us learnt a lot from Rohit. So thank you once again.
See you.
See ya.